Hi, everyone. Welcome to SEEN, the Spiritual and Extraterrestrial Experiencers Network. My name is Donna M. Atwood, and I'm the founder of SEEN. And today we're going to discuss Ascension, what it is, and sort of how to get through it. I'm literally going to share my experiences with you so I can help make this topic a little more real, more tangible, because I think a lot of times we hear folks on YouTube talking about ascension and talking about the science behind it, but I would like to for today to discuss this from an experiencer's perspective, and by experiencer I do mean as the name of my group is Spiritual and Extraterrestrial Experiencers Network. So literally, I'm going to describe my experiences with spiritual entities and extraterrestrial beings with you, and all the lessons I went through Ascension, or at least I'll touch on the top lessons anyway, and try to make that real for you. So Ascension is, for those of you who aren't exactly clear on what it is, I feel like that term gets thrown around a lot, but I'm not sure that everybody even knows exactly what ascension is. So ascension basically is involving the entire planet. And for us human beings, we go through a variety of trials or lessons as a way to become the best version of ourselves that we can possibly become. And once you've graduated from the Ascension School, you might think of Earth as the Earth School. That once you've graduated and have successfully achieved ascension, you've achieved a higher state of consciousness and really a higher state of being overall. And I can tell you that having so I would like to share with you. I'm pretty excited actually. I found out today, very clearly, for certain, no doubt, 100% sure, from Archangel Michael or Michael, that I actually have graduated. So I'm pretty excited. I have been through so much, and I really, strive to be a better human every day. So let's discuss. What is an ascended person like? What are their attributes? Well, basically, an ascended person tends to be altruistic in nature. It's more about service to others rather than service to self. People are very who've ascended tend to be compassionate, and they tend to forgive others as well as themselves. And I've had to go through all of that. I just thought I would kind of go through a fairly quick recap of some of the highlights of my life, and I'm really speaking off the cuff on this. So. I'm just actually going to wind the clock all the way back to when I was about between the age of 4 and 5. I'm actually one of the people, so we're going to go way back in childhood now, and to about 1969, 1970 or so time frame. I thought I was having some really bad dreams. I really remember, not everything, but I certainly remember enough, quite a bit actually, from this horrible gray extraterrestrial situation that we've heard other people talk about. I know sometimes people, kind of laugh, they joke, there's a giggle factor. Oh, you were taken by the aliens, you were probed. People like to joke around about that stuff, but truthfully, I actually really was one of many, many people. I suspect there's many, many more out there who were taken in the middle of the night. I was a child. I was just a little girl, like I said, between 4 and 5 years of age, and I woke up and I didn't know what these things were in my room. I was just a little girl. Think about the time frame. This is way before the internet. I didn't, I was playing with dolls and Matchbox cars, Barbie dolls, and I wasn't thinking about extraterrestrials or anything like that. I didn't know about gray aliens. But they did show up in my bedroom. There was three of them. There were three of them. I remember if my bed was here, my head was, this way. They were, beyond the bottom of the bed off to the right. And I remember there was three of them, and they were like conferring with each other. And I thought it was bizarre. Next thing I know, one of them literally kind of glided towards me, and his eyes, were these big black eyes, and they were just right in front of my face. And then I remember bits and pieces, and we understand more about this now than we used to years ago because of quantum physics. But I do recall that we were able to um, literally float through the wall or the window that was, that was closed. So we were able to go through what we think of as a solid surface. Of course, now we recognize today that things aren't as solid as they seem. And then I remember waking up on it seemed like an operating table, and there were different entities around, not just the grays, but I think reptilians and perhaps an insectoid, but I'm not entirely sure. There was a larger, taller being that was very frightening looking, and very scary things happened. And I passed out, and I awoke, and I remember that as I was leaving wherever I was. So I don't really remember going up in a ship or anything like that, but wherever they actually took me to, we were getting ready to have me leave, I guess. And I remember looking up, and I saw a television that just looped over and over the image of a nuclear bomb going off over and over again, over and over. And I remember it really bothered, my stomach. It started hurting, and I felt really uncomfortable. And then, I woke up in my bed the next morning, and then I went through, a similar experience another one or two times. My mother, before she passed away, she and I discussed all of this, and she told me that she remembered me talking about the monsters who had taken me. And I thought they were the monsters that lived under the bed or in the closet, like a lot of children. That's just what kids think of, and certainly did back then. And so that made me pretty afraid of back in the day we called them aliens. Now we refer to them as extraterrestrials. So my understanding, and it really took me a very, very long time. To come to the understanding that there is there's evil, there's positive and negative. There's a group of people who are we'll say more nefarious. They kind of walk around in a dark, deep state, if you will, of consciousness. And I'm pretty sure that they were probably doing these types of abductions to make people afraid later on of ascension. And this will all make sense because extraterrestrials do play a role in our ascension, believe it or not. So we'll leave that. That was from my earlier childhood. I was also lifted up off the beach in Naples with a friend of mine. That was my preteen years. And my friend was truly very afraid, very shaken up by it. To me, it was, I've been through this before. So by then, I guess I had toughened up. And then, there were other times I thought maybe some things had happened, some missing time and that sort of thing. But the real turning point for me with all of this was about 12 years ago. So I was totally, very, very well into adulthood, middle age. And what happened is I was in the family room. It was nighttime. And the dog was sick. We had a dog, a little dachshund. His name was Hugo. He was very cute, although he did bark too much, but he was so cute. He had a case of colitis, and I was staying with him downstairs in the family room at that time in our at the house that we had at that time in upstate New York. And the dog was asleep. He was fine, but I could not sleep. I tried to go to sleep and I just couldn't. And so, I went over to one of the really large picture window and I looked out at the stars, and it was, it was April in upstate New York. So there was still some snowpack on the ground, but it was a beautiful early spring night. And then I happened to look over, I guess probably to check out the dog, just checking on him. And there happened to be a window over by where the dog was. And outside that window, I could not believe what I saw. I was stunned. I saw a large, I'm going to use my arms here, about like this or so size orb. It was white. It was a very cool shade of white in color. It appeared to be made of plasma. And I referred to it in my mind as a UFO. I didn't know what was going on. I was afraid. So you guys are going to laugh, but it's true. So if you recall, I was standing at a picture window over this way, and I literally took the drapery and I pulled it around, and I'm kind of trying to peek around the drape like it's really going to protect me, right? But this was a 50, as in 50 minute close encounter with what I thought was, a UFO. But the one thing I noticed about it is that it did sort of this little happy dance. It reminded me of a honeybee, where the honeybee, a honeybee will do a happy waggle dance, to get the attention of the other bees to say, "Hey, the food is here," right? So that's what I kept thinking as I saw this thing outside the window. And by the way, it was such a cool color of white. The shade of white was so cool that it tended towards silver, but it was definitely white. Okay. But the thing I noticed about it is it seemed happy to see me. It seemed conscious. I was thinking this is like a spiritual machine or something. I didn't know if it was a scout ship. I just didn't really know what it was at all. And after a while, I realized that I probably didn't need to be afraid of it. It took me a while to kind of realize that it wasn't trying to come into the house. Nobody was around trying to abduct me. So, after a while, I kind of calmed down, but it really did take a while. I was afraid, truly, I was afraid. And, this may sound really boring, but for 50 minutes, I just watched it. It floated. It never landed on the ground. It never left the view of the window. Like I said, it seemed conscious. I don't know. I felt love emanating from it. The kind of love I don't think I honestly don't believe I'd ever experienced before in my life, truly. So eventually, like I said, about 50 minutes later, it did not leave. This thing outside the window did not leave. But I decided that okay, it's time for me to, I need to go to sleep. The family would be up early, and they were going to be in the kitchen, which adjoined, the family room. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to go back on the sofa and go to sleep. The dog never woke up. He was fine. He was sleeping peacefully, and I went to sleep. And so the next morning, I decided not to say anything to anybody in my family. I did not say anything to my husband at the time. We are now divorced. We're friends. Everything's fine. But I knew he wasn't really too open to these types of things. So I kept my mouth shut for quite a while. And, I had a great day. I remember that day. I felt wonderful. And then the next night, I would say just about almost exactly 24 hours later, my entire body shook, similar to like a grand mal seizure, except I was wide awake. I was fully conscious. There was no foam coming out of my mouth. My eyes weren't rolling back, nothing like that. It was My body, quietly shook like a grand mal seizure. I'm not sure for how long, 30, 45 seconds maybe. I'm not sure, honestly. I mean, I wasn't timing it. I was so stunned that my body was shaking. And I figured that it must have had something to do with the orb or the UFO in my mind at the time that I had seen. And so it wasn't too long after that I began to, at the time I didn't know what was happening, but I was starting to develop a higher level of consciousness. I was beginning to exhibit early abilities of telepathy or channeling. And I didn't know what I was hearing or why I was hearing it. I saw some things that I didn't think anybody else was seeing. It was just really bizarre stuff. Well, as it just happens, I have a degree in psychology. And so naturally, I thought that I was having a psychotic break. But luckily, that's not what was happening. But I really did not understand the spiritual nature of what was going on. And so at that point, I had been light activated. And so that was activating me, my body, the cells of my body. It was the beginnings of an upgrade for me to start to work through some things that are important for every soul, to start to learn and kind of face some things about ourselves. And so what happened is I dove straight down into one heck of a dark night of the soul. And that's where I literally battled my demons. And I mean, demons. And I wasn't a bad person, and I'm not a bad person. But I was a little bit, I would say that I maybe let people walk all over me and sort of boss me around, push me around a little bit at that time, and really throughout most of my life. So that was something that I needed to work on. And sadly, I wasn't happy in my marriage, and I knew my husband wasn't happy in the marriage. And we tried, we did. We're both good people. We're not bad people. And he and I are friends now. Everything's fine. I wish him well. And sometimes, just people are just not the right match. That's all. It doesn't make anybody bad. It's just the way it was. So, yeah, so I knew deep down that, I wasn't happy in the marriage, and I really had to work through that. And that took quite a while. That really did, because by the time that we ended up getting divorced, we've been married 30 years. And that was probably around, I'm not exactly sure. I'd have to go back and figure it out, but I'm going to say around the 25th year or so ish. So yeah, the dark night of the soul was truly frightening. I mean, unbelievable what I went through. It was a come to Jesus moment. It really was, quite literally. And as it turned out, I really didn't understand what was happening. But then as the darkness started to kind of recede into the background, it was still kind of there a little bit, but not, but mostly receded. I was hearing a friendlier voice, and I really just didn't know what was happening, but that was the Christ consciousness that I was picking up on. And so perhaps you've heard the term delivered from evil. Well, that's basically what was happening. And so it was very interesting. Time went on, and it took a long time to get used to being able to hear things and sort of know things. My psychic abilities just really ramped up. I mean, they'd been there a little bit, and I remember they had been there in childhood, but they really, really ramped up at this point. And then I went on to, of all things, massage school. So my ex-husband and I actually I opened the first, we had two nanotechnology startup companies. The first one was in Florida. I started that. It was a research and development company. And then when we moved up to upstate New York, I had to close down the one in Florida, and my ex-husband and I reopened it up in upstate New York. So technically we had two nanotechnology startup companies. And so he primarily was working at his day job, and then had this going on the side, and I would help a little bit with business development, marketing, that kind of thing. Um, so time went on, and then I ended up going to massage therapy school. And I wasn't even sure really why I was there, but I felt sort of like almost a calling to go there. And long story short, I think I needed to be there because I found out about subtle energy. In an energy class, we did a laying on of hands in class, and I was actually on a fellow student. I was actually able to hear things just by touching the thigh of a lady student, another student in the class. So that was interesting. That about freaked me out. But my teachers, several of them, maybe four of them, actually told me that every now and then they'll see a student that comes through with that ability, of like clairaudient type of ability. So I learned about that. So that was sort of stacking on the lessons that I had gone through by myself. That began to open the door to not just think in terms of UFO, but to think in terms of spiritual development. So that was interesting. So time went on, and I finally did ask my ex husband if we could please get a divorce, and yes, I said please. um, and so we did, and next thing I knew, I graduated massage therapy school. I passed the New York State boards, and then immediately I had to pack up and move to Arizona, where I live now, because my mother needed me. She was elderly and she really needed a lot of help. So this is definitely where the compassion and, well, kind of everything I had brought up earlier, the forgiveness, compassion, and service to others, all came in through what I needed to do to help my mom. So this was a very difficult thing for me to do, to move out here and take care of my mother. And I don't mean to sound like a cruel, selfish person. It wasn't like that. And I'm not like that. And I wasn't really like that. It's just that in my childhood, when my parents divorced, my mother actually did have custody of me for a while. But sadly, some things happened, and the court actually took me away from my mom, and um, awarded custody to my dad, who was actually an alcoholic. And so back in the day, to have been taken away from one's mother to be given to a father, especially a girl, a daughter, and a father that had a problem with alcoholism. That was pretty unheard of. So it was a very serious and unfortunate situation with my mom. And I love her. She's deceased. Both of my parents are deceased. I love them both. I respect them both. Everything's fine. But what happened is by coming out here to Arizona and helping take care of her, she and I grew closer. It was so obvious she needed my help. She needed my help with everything. And I really was happy to do it because it was just obvious she needed the assistance. And so, I did serve her by doing that. And there was a lot of compassion there for what I saw. And over time, I fully forgave her for what had transpired during my childhood. It was so apparent to me that she had, lived with a lot of guilt her whole life about this. And she and I grew a lot closer. And it was very heartwarming the way that she, even when she was so sick, she truly attempted to mother me by teaching me things that she thought were important. And so by the time that she passed away, our relationship was good. It was solid. Everything was just right. It was right where it needed to be. And that was really one of the goals I had in taking care of her, was to mend that relationship. So I'm looking at the time here now, and I'm going to end part one here of my discussing my own ascension, and I will go ahead and pick up and do a second video. So we'll have a part two to this. So again, I would like to thank you so very much for spending this time with me and listening to my story. I hope some of this maybe is resonating with some of you and is helpful to just make Ascension sort of more real, more tangible. So again, thank you. And my name is Donna M. Atwood, and I'm the founder of SEEN, the Spiritual and Extraterrestrial Experiencers Network. And I'll see you on part two of this video series. Thank you. Take care.